Hi everyone, this is Mandy Wong at Own Your Story, and I am a life and relationship coach, and I'm here to really empower women to love who they are one story at a time. This week, and hopefully I'm using my Mac, so hopefully you can see this properly and it's not choppy because it looks a little choppy here, but anyhow, let's hope this works. This week I've been talking a lot about energy, and I talked about it in my last post about how there's two types of energies and how those two types make up 7 different levels. And I talked about one of them being anabolic, which sounded really positive, and then one being catabolic, which sounded kind of negative. So I'm actually going to go through all 7 levels in a little bit more detail in this video, and I'm actually going to give an example of what the 7 levels would look like in a situation where you get into a fight with, let's say, your spouse or your partner. So the way that we react is oftentimes within these levels, and we can fluctuate between these levels at any given time. So even in 5 minutes, I can go through all 7 levels, depending on the way I see the world and how easily I can shift my thought process throughout. So before I go into the 7 levels, I do want to spend a little bit more time on the anabolic and catabolic piece. I did pose a question out there this week saying, how can catabolic energy be not good or bad? Because catabolic, I had described it as draining. It could be depleting. It could feel like it's producing hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. And that all sounds bad, right? Like, why would we ever want to feel those things or have that type of energy? But again, when we talk about energy, we always say that it's neither good or bad because sometimes it's so necessary to feel that catabolic energy. And an example of that would be if somebody were to hurt, well, I think my dog. If I went to the park and somebody kicked my dog, naturally, I would be pretty catabolic. I mean, that's when that fight or flight response would kick in, and I would get really angry. And at that moment, choosing catabolic energy in that specific scenario serves me well. And again, so we're not here to say that anabolic and catabolic is good or bad, and neither are the 7 different levels. It's more just about identifying what levels are serving us at that particular moment. And the moment that we become aware of what level we actually are in, we can feel more empowered to choose something that's going to really support us in moving forward. So they're all necessary. All levels have their pros and their cons. And as I go through them, I don't want you to feel like, oh my God, I'm always at this level. This must be bad. No, not at all. And I want to also highlight that it's often the filters that we have, that we grew up with, our learned behavior, our coping mechanisms. This is how we see the world, and this is where it's served us well to a point where it's gotten us to where we are now. So there's no need to feel bad or ashamed if you feel like you're constantly at a level 1. No, there is no good and bad. And sometimes I encourage people to be in their level 1. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. So let's talk about the 7 different levels. So the first level is victim. So that sounds pretty bad, I know. Victim has that core thought of I lose. So they feel like no matter what they do, they don't have many options. Like they feel like their back is up against the corner and there's nothing that they can do to make things better. So in an example where you're fighting with your partner or your spouse, what a level 1 thought process could be is, oh my goodness, he always does this. I'm always wrong. I never win in a fight. I always have to apologize first. And when we're in that level 1 mentality of victim, we just feel like there's nothing we can do to make it better. And we feel like everything is our fault, and we end up feeling guilty. However, when I say level 1 doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad, is that sometimes nice to feel like a victim, because when you're a victim, what typically happens is that somebody is taking care of you. An example of when level 1 would serve me well is if I'm sick. So if I'm sick, I want someone to take care of me. I want my husband to like bring me chicken noodle soup. And at that point, level 1 serves me well. And it's a level that I choose for myself. Level 2 is the mentality of fighter. So the core thought is you lose. And so when you're fighting with your partner, what could happen is that you blame him. You think, oh my God, he's always wrong. Why does he think like that? And there's a lot of judgment that comes into play. So whatever the thought is, it's I'm right, he's wrong, and that's that. And level 2 has its pros in a sense that oftentimes you can get your way. You know, you can fight your way through it. It serves you well in that aspect. But what ends up happening is that typically people can't stay at that level for very long, because it's not fun to be around somebody who's always trying to fight with you or making you feel like you're wrong all the time. So that's when level 2 cannot work in your favor. Then we're going to go to level 3. Level 3 is a rationalizer. And when I say rationalizer, I think about myself a lot. Before coaching, I was just always trying to find the silver lining. And so in a relationship, what level 3 could look like is, okay, well, I don't want to rock the boat, so I'm just going to agree. I'm just going to tolerate and say you're right, and let's just move forward with it, because I don't want to fight anymore. So that's a level 3 mentality. I mean, it serves you well in a sense that you can move forward now. You've taken some responsibility for the way that you feel, but the core thought is, I win, and if you win too, that's great. And the reason why you win when you compromise is because now you can just move forward. Okay, so that's what level 3 is. Level 4 is the idea of a caregiver. And I have to admit that my husband is way better at being the caregiver than I am, but it's oftentimes you feel bad. You feel bad, you feel guilty, you just want them to be happy, you know, and it's not because you're compromising. That's truly what makes you happy. Like, you just want to make things right, and you want to make him happy. And so that's the role of a caregiver, is not that they're giving in, it's that's what they really want. And that's all great, but what can happen is that a person who is constantly a caregiver can eventually feel completely drained, especially if they're not filling themselves up. So I see a ton of women who are caregivers, and they just give, and they make everybody a priority, but they don't make themselves a priority. And what ends up happening is that they end up feeling like a victim, or they end up feeling like a fighter, like they have to fight for themselves in order to get what they want. So there's definitely a correlation there. And then we have level 5. A level 5 is an opportunist. So a level 5 is somebody who is looking for opportunities everywhere, and the core thought is we both win or we don't play at all. So when it comes to fighting in a relationship, what it could look like is, okay, what is the opportunity here? Because there must be a reason why we're fighting, and there's an opportunity now for us to grow. There's an opportunity for us to perhaps better our communication. There's an opportunity to become more aligned with the values that we want to bring into our family. So that's where level 5 will kick in. And when we think about level 5 outside of a relationship, we can think about level 5 even in a role of a workplace. Level 5 leaders are the ones that typically are the most successful, because they're not just looking for their win, they're looking for the win of their team as well. So again, the core thought is we both win or we don't play at all. Level 6 and level 7 are a little bit more difficult to explain sometimes because we don't typically live in this space. However, we always experience bits and pieces of it. So level 6 is the creator. And the core thought is that we're always winning. So if you think about a moment where you were just totally in the zone, like whether for me, it's like when I'm writing a piece and I'm like, my fingers are just like typing away and I'm not worried about spell check. I'm not worried about anything. Everything is just flowing. And that is my level 6 energy. But in level 6, what it could also look like in a relationship after a fight is that what it could look like is you don't even try to fix it. You know, oftentimes when we fight, you just want to fix it right away. You can't go to bed angry. You don't feel like you need to fix it because you know whatever just happened was absolutely necessary for your relationship, and that you still feel a permanent sense of joy because no matter what happens, you know that you and your partner, you're happy, you're content. You know that you guys are going to be okay. You know that no matter what happens, you will always lean onto each other. So that is what level 6 looks like. Level 7 is when you're a visionary. So this is when unconditional love totally kicks in. And it's funny because when we were trying to explain what level 7 looks like, and we were talking about unconditional love, somebody asked, you know, I think it was our teacher, our trainer, he was like, well, who has unconditional love for their spouse? And of course, everybody raised up their hands to say that they did. And then he asked, okay, actually, no, he didn't ask. Then somebody raised their hand up, Chris, and he's like, well, you know what? Actually, I think the only person that has unconditional love for me is my dog. And when he said that, the trainer was like, okay, yeah, you know what? Let's do an experiment. You put your dog in the trunk of your car, and you put your spouse also in the trunk of your car, leave them there for an hour, and when you pop open the trunk, see who is happy to see you. That is unconditional love. And it's not to say that we don't experience it, because we do with our spouse. There are going to be moments where they really make you so mad, but it doesn't matter. You love them regardless. You know that you and him, you guys are one. And you will have moments of that. But we don't live there, because if your spouse, I don't know, hit you, cheated on you, I don't know, did something awful, that love might be challenged. Not necessarily meaning that it could be totally unconditional. So those are the 7 different levels of energy, and we experience that type in every single situation. I mean, that was just one small example of what it would look like if you were to fight with your spouse. But what would the 7 levels look like when you're at work? What kind of a leader are you? What type of a level of leadership do you think you showcase? Are you command and control? Because command and control would be like a level 2. Are you always helping others? Are you doing everybody else's work? Could that be a level 4 because you just want to help everybody? Again, so levels will be applicable to everything. It's even the way that you look at yourself. How do you look at yourself? When you're judging yourself, you're at a level 2. When you practice self-care, you're at a level 4. So we experience that all the time, and oftentimes we're so unconscious of what levels we are until we start getting familiar with what it actually means. So in November, when I talk about the November special, I am talking about the 7 different levels of energy and how it shows up in your life. So I gave an example of one small situation, but how does it apply in your life on a day-to-day basis? What are the filters that you currently have of the world where you showcase your level 1 energy, where you showcase your level 2 energy? When are you at your best? When are you totally in the zone and totally in flow? What triggers that? And that's why I call it the best you assessment, because we can identify the best version of you when you are totally in the flow of your energy. And when you experience a lot of the stressor energy, so a lot of that catabolic energy in the lower levels, how would it look like if we reduce that? What if you could have all the success that you currently have today, but with a lot less stress? So together we come up with strategies to see what that would look like. So if you're interested in learning about how the 7 levels of energy look like in your life, please feel free to send me a message or visit the link that I'm going to put into the description, because this special is not going to last for too much longer. It's lasting until the end of November, and then I am going to raise the price. because I didn't realize how much time I used to prep. It's a long time for me to actually prep for the debrief. So after you do the assessment, I spend 90 minutes and I go over what it looks like for you. And then from there, we come up with an action plan. So anyhow, thank you so much for joining. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next week. Bye.